Hey everyone, welcome to a new video. Before we get into it, I just want to thank all those people hitting the like button, subscribe button, and leaving me comments on what you think of these videos. You've given me a lot of ideas and I have a lot of content backlog to put out for you guys. A lot of interesting stuff dealing with 3D modeling, animation, 3D printing, and fabrication. So we'll be slowly pushing that out now that we're all home confined and got the time now to do these things. So this video is a little bit different. I'm going to be making videos that are more like play-by-plays on workflows. I do a lot of workshops and a lot of tutoring sessions, as well as making tutorial videos and posting the recordings of workshops I do. I was thinking I would compress them into little bits of what I thought was the best parts of the workflow, or the best techniques that are included in that workflow. More oriented to kind of give you a play-by-play of what it is that goes into making a project, so that you know whether or not you even want to pick up that software, or whether you should actually look into that direction. So yeah, leave a comment in the section below if you think that's a good idea, or hit the like button to let me know. So to start out with, it's really just a clean Rhino model. It's architectural, and the level of detail is basically done to match a foreground and a background. So the background is not very detailed, very low poly. You know, it lends itself very easily to be manipulated later on. And the front part is textureless, but we want to get things like mullions and little connections that you might have. And I got some trees in there just to add model detail. A really important thing too is to organize your material by layers, or your objects by layers. You can actually have a lot of sub layers too if you want to do that, but generally what you want to do is have objects that are going to receive the same material grouped by layer or sub layer. That's a much easier way to layer apply these textures if you don't have a mess of a model and you have to go and correct which surface is what kind of material or texture. Eventually it might work better to explode some surfaces or keep some surfaces together. So definitely want to keep all your elements classified by texture in your layers. So I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and what he remembers V-Ray as was V-Ray 2.0. If you remember V-Ray from those days, the interface wasn't that great. It didn't really tell you much. So this interface is much better. This dialog is generally partitioned in half. So on the left-hand side, you'll have all your properties, or different objects, or different V-Ray assets. And on the right, you'll have advanced settings for those properties or those assets that you're bringing in for rendering. So right after model detail, you have lighting, right? So HDRIs basically become standard, right? Image files. So I had some free HDRIs I was able to download, and once I plugged those in and you test out the render, you'd really just have to correct the exposure values to get the lighting to match correctly, so that you see the correct amount of brightness for the sky, and so the sky is also emitting the right amount of light onto the model. That was generally easy to do in V-Ray, so you just kind of put in a bitmap and then you apply that as an environment image or an environment asset, and you mess with your either the lighting right there is something I just changed, like the multiplier for the background lighting, or you could mess with your exposure settings, or in your advanced settings you also have camera options. If you want to get into ISO, shutter speed, and all that stuff, they've really simplified that on the right hand panel of the general settings. The rotation also is pretty easy. So again, if you want to make edits to the HDRI, you would go to this advanced editor on the right hand side, and yeah, that's basically, you have values for rotation, you have values for editing color. It takes a little bit of play to realize what all the possible modifiers can do, but generally speaking, it's very straightforward. What I'm doing over here now is adding a directional light besides the HDRI, once I get that about right, to add a little bit of dramatic aspects to the scene, or some really sharp shadows combined with the soft shadows that the environmental texture does. I'll add a directional light from the general area that it's coming from the HDRI. So in this case, I also colored the light a little bit of an orangey yellowish tone that's very, very desaturated, or very, very light, to kind of match the color of the sky again. So adding that directional light definitely adds a lot of realism, I feel. And once you get a baseline for your lighting, you know, then the directional light really kicks it up a notch, and you might have to adjust your camera settings once more. When it comes to textures, V-Ray for Rhino comes with a pretty decent library of textures, actually. So it comes with some images that you can check out previews of, and it comes with the accompanying bump files and all that stuff if you want to mess with that. But generally, opening one of those files is very easy. You just have to find the right directory, and it'll give you a little preview on the right hand side. And if you go into the options, you can change the UV mapping for that texture so that it tiles a little bit better. There's also, I haven't figured out how to do random rotation of those tiles. You can do tile rotation, and you can alter the way that those textures are mapped. They look more organic. If you don't want to get into that, or if you set your UV textures from Rhino, V-Ray will use those UV maps that you have in Rhino for the rendering. If this doesn't make any sense to you, then you could just scale your model up or down to make sure that the textures fit correctly, right? If you don't want to get that into it and you just kind of need to get it done quick, resize. But generally speaking, resizing the textures is very easy from the advanced properties panel in the V-Ray asset editor. There's a lot of really cool presets for materials too to start from scratch. One of them is a blend material, so you could take different materials that you imported or created inside of V-Ray and blend them together with a variety of different properties on how they blend together. So that's what I went for in order to create the landscape, kind of combine a rocky texture with just a green color. So adding maps too, like you see there, adding a noise map to create that displacement on that green texture as well. It's all interactable in that panel. So if you want to create patterns within V-Ray that you want to apply to your textures, it's all based on numbers and sliders. Very, very familiar interface stuff if you use Rhino and Grasshopper often. And I've got to say, the real-time rendering in V-Ray has gotten so much better. Like, you can actually orbit around and set settings for how often the screen is refreshing. So once it gets heavy, you can orbit around the model and not have it necessarily update until you get there. But generally speaking, using your GPU, once you configure it to use your NVIDIA card or whatever you have, it runs really, really well. And I've really had to saturate the model with detail to really like take the software to its limits. Glass textures come with a lot of options, a lot of specific properties for those on whether they're two-sided or whether they light on just one side, whether they let in light from one side or another. So a technique I found was creating a two-sided material and applying a glass material to both sides, similar to a blending material, but it's a two-sided material where it will show one on one side and one on the other on the front face and the back face of a surface. Yeah, and the general properties can add a lot of stuff too. You've got your ambient occlusion, you've got your fog. You know, toggling those settings and applying the proper values can really give you a bomb render pretty quickly. Again, it just takes a little knowledge of maybe if you're really new to this stuff, it takes knowledge of general camera, scene lighting, and etc. But if you're used to 3D modeling or using rendering engines or visual effects, all this stuff should be very simple, very straightforward. And V-Ray's educational components for their software were great for me. I just followed their own little workshops and explanations on how to use V-Ray, and I got it. Applying different textures to different objects as well, like this free tree I downloaded. I applied my own custom textures once I understood how the textures were mapped onto it, and it came out looking so much better than when I downloaded it. So I was able to replicate that whole process for a model that I downloaded online to make it look specific for V-Ray. Which of course then V-Ray lets you export those models with those textures as a proxy model. And with a proxy model, when you bring that into another project, it'll take a lot less resources to display that geometry to, and it'll take cut your render time by a lot. I will say though, the Grasshopper stuff for V-Ray I wasn't too happy with. The components that I was finding when I installed didn't look the same as the documentation that they have for it. It's definitely lacking a little bit there. I don't know if it's my version of Grasshopper, my version of Rhino. I try to keep up to date with that stuff, but I ran into a lot of issues with the Grasshopper side of things. So I think they got a little bit more work to do there on how to have Grasshopper play a role in making your animations really great. So something that was really neat that I showed at the end was their tune materials, which outline another material that you have. However, this does force you to have to use your CPU to render and not your GPU. So overall, I was really happy with V-Ray for Rhino. Like I said, I've been using it since version 2.0. That was almost 10 years ago. And I'm seeing that they've completely reworked the software, at least to work inside of Rhino. I am a little bummed that the version of Rhino is a lot more limited than V-Ray for other softwares such as Maya or Blender, etc. But it is understandable because of the nature of that Rhino modeling is, or the way that the Rhino software is built. I do hope to see better use of how scripting can be incorporated in V-Ray, and definitely how animations can be much easier. Maybe also Rhino including some sort of feature where you're able to move objects around as you animate them. From what I've been able to see, there's no viable way to do this, right? Like, and the reason why, really, my conclusion, I guess, would be, for now, I'm going to export my Rhino models and put them into Blender. I've been learning Blender recently, and it's, as far as modeling wise, it's very similar to other stuff that you have out there. It's fairly easy to use, and all the rendering elements that I'm talking about for this software transfer to Blender's native rendering software. And V-Ray is planning to release a V-Ray version for Blender. So will I get V-Ray for Rhino? Probably. Because for just strict illustration or architectural rendering, it's great. It saves me a step. But for kick-ass animation, rendering, that sort of stuff, exporting an OBJ out of Rhino into a software like Blender is, I think, going to be my default. And my sort of express pipeline will be to kind of cheat and use V-Ray and Rhino, and maybe do a lot more Photoshop work there. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, this is just my opinion. I've been 3D modeling and doing renderings for over 10 years now, since I was 16 years old, so 10 years. I'm trained as an architect, and now I'm really diving back into the rendering and visual effects game. So from what I've tested and what I've seen out there, these are my thoughts. V-Ray, keep it up. I love your products. Price-wise, V-Ray is not cheap. The V-Ray version for Rhino, I do believe, is cheaper. You can find a link in the description down below to check out a 2-week demo, or if you can also get the educational license. The educational license comes much cheaper if you happen to be a student or a professor.